In that stretch of Louisiana where the road always feels damp, whether the sky has given anything up or not, time wasn't kept by calendars. It was kept by smell. Hot oil in the yards behind the sawmills, fish and rust down by the river, burnt coffee in kitchens that never truly went dark. And when night came, there was that other smell too, the sweet bitter one that clung to places where people went to forget their own names for a few hours. The town was small enough that the mailman could tell you who was sick without reading a note, and big enough to offer a kind of anonymity that only worked after 10 at night. In daylight, everybody was somebody. After dark, some folks became nothing but a hat and a shadow. Dupre's place sat outside the center of town, where the highway opened into a gravel lot and two crooked trees that never shaded anyone. From the road, it looked like just another supper stop, a tired sign, yellow light, a front door that creaked like it was always deciding whether it should let you in. Strangers drove past without thinking twice. The locals knew better. They knew that was where one shift ended for some men and started for others. Inside, the world had its own order. The bar ran along the left wall, long and dark, from years of wet rags and hard elbows. Behind it, the bottles weren't luxury, they were inventory. A man learned early that in a place like that, the roof didn't stay up on romance or sin. It stayed up on a balanced till, enough ice, and nobody breaking what they couldn't pay for. Farther in was the room. Small tables, a low stage where sometimes a thin little band showed up, sometimes just a jukebox spitting out songs with a crooked sound. The kitchen sat in the back, hot as a secret, serving the kind of food that kept a man standing. Sandwiches, thick soup, coffee made like it was meant to cut sleep with a knife. And then there was the back door. It wasn't hidden exactly, but it might as well have been. Folks who used it didn't want to be seen under the front light. That door was for messages, for deliveries, for just a minute. The door that existed to keep the town's good face intact. In 1958, people didn't speak loudly about certain things. They spoke around them with polite smiles. The preacher warned about temptation on Sunday, and on Monday he didn't look too close at who crossed the highway after dark. The sheriff kept the town quiet, and quiet in those days was an agreement. You mind your own shame, and don't pull the sheet off anyone else. It was inside that agreement that Lila Mae learned how to work. She wasn't the owner. She wasn't the show. She wasn't the name on any sign. She was a waitress, and anyone who understood a place like Dupre's understood what that meant. She was the clock. A waitress learns time without a watch. She reads it by how fast the ice melts, by the way men talk when the night has gone too far, by how a bill gets slid under an ashtray, flat when it comes from a clean hand, wadded when it comes from a nervous one. She knows who pays on the nail and who pays double to owe nobody. She sees the trembling hand and the hand looking for a fight. She sees the man who comes in too neat and won't touch his glass like he's afraid of leaving prints. Lila Mae had that kind of sight. More than that, she had discipline. She moved without hurry, like she had no reason to run. She carried a tray like she'd been born with its weight in her arm. She didn't talk much, not rude, not cold, just guarded, because in a place like that, if you talked too much, somebody would remember, and if they remembered, they could use it. Later on, a man who knew that region like a folded map in his pocket would say Lila Mae wasn't the kind of woman who made things up in that town. That was rarer than extra money. Her shift began while there was still light in the sky and ended when the world had forgotten what daytime was. That night, the heat felt like it had swallowed the air itself. A corner fan rattled like an old thing trying to stay alive. The jukebox played a slow song nobody listened to, but everybody used it to measure distance between one conversation and the next. Caleb Broussard worked the bar without really looking at anyone. Quiet shoulders, steady hands, eyes that always seemed half a mile away. He poured, wiped closed tabs, like routine was the only religion he trusted. Dupre moved table to table with a smile that never reached his eyes, tending to what couldn't be seen. Who was in debt, who was irritated, who had too much name to be there. And near the kitchen, a new girl, still not sure where to put her hands when she got nervous, tried to look like she belonged. Nobody truly belonged. Some people just paid more for it. Lila Mae noticed movement before faces, a car stopping off to the side. Not up front, a pause before the door opened, a man stepping in like he didn't want to touch the air in the room. He wasn't the kind of customer who wandered in by mistake. Light suit, too clean for that highway. Shoes too polished for gravel. Still, he knew exactly where to sit. The darker corner. Like he'd done it before. He didn't order anything strong. He didn't order anything that left a trail. He ordered coffee. Coffee is what a man asks for when he wants to stay awake, or when he wants to look innocent. Lila Mae brought the cup with her usual calm and set it down like it meant nothing. But as she stepped away, she saw Duprou shift position, not by accident, but to watch. And Caleb, behind the bar, went too quiet, as if silence itself were a tool. Hours later, when the room had thinned out, and the last customers dragged their feet toward the door, Lila Mae started closing up. Ashtrays, glasses, tables. The kitchen still held heat, like it refused to let the night end. That's when she found it. In the bottom of a glass left in that dark corner was something small, heavier than anything ought to be, if it could be forgotten by anyone paying attention to their own life. It wasn't flashy, it didn't shine, but it had the honest weight of something that didn't need shine to prove value. A ring. Plain, smooth, 2 initials worn on the inside, like somebody had worn it for years without ever taking it off. Lila Mae held it a moment and felt the metal cold. Even in that heat, she didn't look around to find its owner. She didn't call out. She didn't raise her voice. Because in places like that, when a man leaves a ring behind, it isn't always carelessness. Sometimes it's hurry. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's because he never planned to come back. Lila Mae closed her hand slowly, like she was pocketing a coin she didn't want the world to see. And there, in the quiet kitchen, water running into the sink and the radio low with an old song, she understood something she couldn't dress up in pretty words. The town was going to need a story by morning. And when a town needs a story, it picks one that sounds clean, even if it has to dirty somebody to make it fit. Later that narrator would say, and it's the kind of sentence a man keeps because he knows it's true. That was the night the club stopped being just a job and became a judgment. And from that ring on, everybody started measuring time a different way. Because it isn't what happens that changes a life. It's what people decide to say happened. Before there was Dupre's place, before there was gravel under tires and yellow light over a door, Lila Mae had already learned 2 things they don't teach in any schoolhouse in rural Louisiana. First, hunger doesn't announce itself. It comes in quiet. It sits down at your table like it belongs there. Nobody calls it hunger. They call it holding on till tomorrow. They call it making do. They call it not spending right now. Second, the world doesn't forgive people who ask for too much. She learned both early, like folks do when summer is heavy and money is light. The house she grew up in wasn't miserable in the way city people picture it. No constant crying in windows, no loud tragedies. It was small, wood frame, and it creaked when the wind turned off the river. There was a dirt yard, a fence that always needed fixing, and a clothesline where laundry dried slow, because the damp never truly left. Her mother, strong hands, short words, didn't have the kind of affection that spills out. She had the kind that holds. She got up early, boiled water, counted what was left in the pantry like a banker counts bills. Only there was no manager, no loan, no discussion. There was just what could be done. Her father worked where he could, stretches at the mill, stretches hauling loads for whoever needed it. He came home smelling like sweat and fresh-cut lumber, shirt stuck to his back, face worn with a tired patience. He wasn't much for talking. When he did talk, it was the necessary things. Don't start trouble. Don't owe favors. Don't let anyone see you weak. That was the language in that house. Not warmth poured out, but rules for surviving. There was a Bible, too, always kept in the same spot, like a brick holding up an invisible wall. On Sundays, Her mother pinned up her hair, put on the best thing she had, and walked the children to church with a look that said, "This is what keeps people from talking." In that part of the country, church wasn't just faith. It was standing. It was record. It was who you were in other people's eyes. Folks who didn't show up in church showed up in people's mouths. Lila Mae grew up learning shame like a currency. Some things could be poor, but they couldn't be shameful. You could eat little, but you couldn't beg. You could patch a dress, but you couldn't take charity. You could lose a job, but you couldn't lose respect, though respect was thin, held together by posture and silence. She had a younger brother who got sick easy, weak chest, a cough that came back after 2 straight rainy days. In a house like theirs, sickness wasn't just medicine. It was missed work. It was a drive too far. It was money that wasn't there. Her mother did what she could. Tea, a warm cloth, a short prayer at the bedside. That brother was where Lila Mae's code began to harden into shape. As a girl, she learned to go to the store with counted coins and steady eyes. Like shame could be read on your face, she learned to speak to grown folks without lowering her head too far. She learned to say, "No, thank you," clean and quick, because anything beyond that could turn into debt. And in the country, debt is never just money. It's favor. It's obligation. It's somebody believing they've got rights over you. Her mother used to say it the same way every time, like she was reciting a verse. If you owe, you obey. Lila Mae carried that line like a nail, not because she liked it, but because she recognized truth when she heard it. When she got older, there weren't many roads open for a girl without schooling and without a last name that carried weight. Housework, kitchen work, factory work, if you were lucky, the kind of labor that asked you to swallow pride and smile at people who never washed their own cup. She tried the factory for a while. Noise, repetition, a tiredness sleep didn't cure. The pay was small, but it came. Then one bad week, the boss cut people loose like crooked boards. Around the same time, her father got hurt. Nothing dramatic, just enough to keep him off the job too long. That's when the house went quiet in a different way. The quiet of money running out before the week does. A man telling this story later might say a woman's choice doesn't come in a pretty moment. It comes in a tight one. Lila Mae's came on an ordinary Tuesday, when she saw her mother staring into the pantry and closing the door too gently. That night she heard her mother say, like it was just conversation, "Dupre's looking for a waitress." Her father didn't look at her, but his jaw set. He knew what it meant. Dupre was known, not friend, not enemy. Known the way you know weather. You don't argue with it, you get ready. His club was one of those contradictions the whole town pretends not to see. Respectable men stopped there and sat front pew Sunday. Folks swore they'd never stepped inside and still knew the price of coffee and the bartender's name. The place existed so other lives could keep running without anyone admitting it. Working there came with a stamp you couldn't see, even if you only served food. Even if you only carried a tray and wiped tables, the stamp was the same. On the other side, Lila Mae knew it. Her mother knew it. Her father knew it. The whole town knew it. At that kitchen table, under weak light and the sound of crickets outside, nobody gave a speech. Nobody talked about dreams. They just looked at each other the way people do when something gets decided without words. Her father said only, "You go because you have to, not because you want to." Her mother followed, sealing it like a pact. And you don't give them a reason. Don't give them a reason. That became the center of her code. The day she went to see Dupre, she wore the simplest dress she owned. Pressed clean, hair pinned. No loud lipstick, no perfume. She went the way you go to a funeral. Steady posture, watchful eyes. No openings for talk. Dupre looked her over without being crude. He understood reputation. He spoke in basics. Hours, pay, rules. And in the middle of those rules, he gave her one that sounded like warning. You're going to see a lot. The trick is not acting like you saw it. She understood, and she answered the right way. I'm here to work. That's how her life slid into that place. Not out of curiosity, not out of rebellion, but out of simple arithmetic. Bills don't wait. The first shifts tested her posture. She learned to move between tables without getting lost. She learned to spot trouble before it turned into trouble. She learned to smile without inviting. She learned to be polite without getting familiar. Most of all, she learned to hold things inside without letting them show on her face. That kind of learning becomes a second skin. Over time, the club became both the place that paid for bread and the place that charged her soul in small installments. Some nights, she went home with enough tips to buy her brother's medicine and still fix the fence. Some nights, she went home with a man's laugh stuck in her ear like dirt. She never spoke about it at home. Part of the agreement was this: the family didn't ask, and she didn't explain. They took the money the way they took rain, grateful and afraid. Daytime, she was so-and-so's daughter. Nighttime, she was Dupra's girl, one face carrying two versions. She learned not to defend herself, because defense turns into talk, and talk turns into judgment. She allowed herself only one thing: to stay honest about what she knew. Not courtroom justice, small justice. The kind of person living among people learns, because lies become knives. She didn't make things up. She didn't add on. She didn't exaggerate. If someone asked too much, she answered less. If they tried to pull gossip out of her, she acted like she hadn't heard. And when something wrong happened in front of her, she didn't rush to tell, because she knew telling rarely fixed anything. Telling just decided who got hurt first. That code turned into reputation. In that club, reputation was worth more than tips. Dupre trusted her with the hard tables. Caleb trusted her with short messages. Even the rough ones learned to respect the way she refused to bend too far. And it was that same code that became trouble the week Harold Thibodeaux disappeared. Because when a town decides to invent a story, it can't stand someone who won't lie for it or against it. Someone who simply remembers. That night, with the cold ring in her hand and steam rising from the sink like fog, Lila Mae understood that her whole life, the poorhouse, the hard mother, the quiet father, the rule about not owing, had been training her for that moment. Not to make her a hero, not to make her a martyr, just to help her recognize the point where silence stops being protection and starts being sin. She kept the ring not like a thief, but like someone holding a piece of the real world inside a place where the real world gets replaced by talk. And when she locked the back door that night, she didn't yet know how big the name was that ring belonged to. She didn't know the man's son worked at the bank and carried war in his bones. She didn't know the man's wife could steer a town without lifting a hand. But she knew one thing with a clarity that scared her. By morning, somebody was going to have to pay for that disappearance. And in that town, payment always came due from the people who couldn't collect it back. Dupre's place had an order to it that wasn't written on any wall. It wasn't like a store where rules hang in plain sight. Here, you learned the rules by watching, and when you got one wrong, nobody called you wrong. They just started treating you like somebody who wouldn't last. Lila Mae lasted because she understood that early. The first warning always came the same way. A look from Dupre, quick, with no anger in it. He didn't need to say much. He used words the way he used matches, sparingly. In a place like this, an owner couldn't afford to spend his energy on shouting. Shouting drew attention. Attention made talk. Talk brought inspections. So Dupre kept the machine running with what he had: a contained smile, a steady stance, and an old skill for making men understand no without turning it into a fight. Lila Mae's work started before night was fully night. She came in while there was still a little light left in the sky, and the kitchen was already hot. The cook, a woman who didn't waste smiles because smiles cost strength, kept a pot going and a towel on her shoulder. The smell of grease, onions, and coffee mixed with the smell of a freshly mopped floor, a hard attempt at keeping things clean in a place that got trampled by the kind of life that didn't stay clean. Lila Mae tied on her apron, checked the tables, counted forks and glasses like she was counting ammunition. She knew which tables were safe and which were trouble, even when there wasn't an obvious reason. Not superstition, experience. A table near the stage, men who drank to be seen. A table in the corner, men who drank to forget. A table close to the back door, men who didn't want to be remembered anywhere. And then there was the logic of money. In a place where so much was talk, money spoke straight, bills told on people. A man who laid down a folded bill and asked for change loud wanted to show power. A man who left a tip without making a show wanted to buy peace. A man who left nothing had a hunger Lila Mae recognized from childhood. Only in grown men, hunger often came with anger. She learned how to serve without waking that anger. Caleb Broussard stood behind the bar like time had put him there and never took him out. His face held lines that didn't come from laughter. They came from sun, smoke, and long nights. His hands were steady and fast, not because he was nervous, but because he respected routine. Clean glass, enough ice, the right pour. Caleb was the kind of man who didn't get lost in conversation. War had left him with a silent discipline. He didn't bring it up. It showed itself in the way he watched the door without looking like he watched, in the way he placed himself without blocking a path, in the way he caught a change in tone, the way other men caught a change in weather. Between Caleb and Lila Mae, there was an agreement without words. He didn't ask about her life. She didn't ask about his past. They understood each other through work. Sometimes, when the room got thick and the night started leaning toward trouble, Caleb would say only, "2 tables in the corner are getting restless," and that was enough for Lila Mae to adjust her pace, come through with a tray, set food down like a shield, and cut off the chance of a fight. Food calms a man. Coffee keeps talk slow. Water brings shame back to somebody drunk. Those were tools of the job. Dupré moved through the room with the skill of somebody who knew human weakness without having to despise it. He greeted the important men with the same "evening" he used for the truckers, not because he believed in equality, but because he believed in management. Favor one kind too openly, and you grow resentment. And resentment on a hot night with alcohol turns into mess. Then there was Deputy Harlan Piter, who didn't come in to drink. He came in to remind. He sat where he could see the front door and the bar at the same time, ordered a coffee or a soda, and stayed still like his body was a warning. When he spoke, it was low. When he smiled, it was only his mouth. The kind of man who understood power as steady pressure, not explosions. The sheriff himself hardly ever showed up. A sheriff in a small town knows too much presence creates familiarity. Familiarity turns into requests. Better to let the deputy make rounds and keep the name clean. The new girl, the one with worn shoes and watchful eyes, was named June. Nobody in that place used full names right away. A full name was something you earned after you proved you weren't trouble. June hadn't earned anything yet. She'd only arrived. June cleaned and helped in the kitchen when she was needed. Sometimes Dupré put her out on the floor carrying plates when the room overflowed. Not because she was good at it, but because a place like that runs on whatever hands are available. She tried hard, poor thing, with the look of somebody who wants to do right and doesn't know the hidden rules. Lila Mae noticed her from the start, not out of tenderness she could afford to show, but out of instinct. She recognized a kind of fragility the town didn't forgive. The fragility of somebody who still believed that if she did everything right, she'd be treated fairly. Out there, fairness wasn't guaranteed by effort. It was guaranteed by protection. Family, church, a man who'd sign for you, a last name that opened doors. June didn't have any of that. At first, Lila Mae kept her distance, not because she didn't want to help, but because helping too early creates a tie, and a tie becomes obligation, and obligation becomes danger when the place you work is watched by men like Harlan Piter. But routine shortens distance. One night, June dropped a glass by accident. The crack of it made 2 heads turn at once. Dupré looked with the patience of a man who knew glass cost money. June went pale, ready to apologize too much. Lila Mae got there before the apology became humiliation. She swept the pieces up, grabbed a rag, wiped the floor with calm authority, and said only, "Slow down. Hold the tray with your arm, not your wrist." June nodded like she'd been handed a secret, because that's what it was. In a place like that, simple technique is survival. That was how Lila Mae became the clock of the house, by being steady. The unwritten rules started at the door. Rule 1. Don't stare at who walks in. Staring feels like judgment, and judgment makes dangerous people feel exposed. Rule 2. Don't ask names from folks who don't want to be named. You serve the way you serve. Sir, more coffee? I'll be right back. Rule 3. The back door exists, but you act like you never saw it. You might see somebody slip through. You might notice a car that doesn't park up front. You might hear a short message, but you don't comment. Comment creates story. Rule 4. Don't argue with a drunk man. You put food down. You change the subject. You call Dupre or Caleb. You do what you have to do, but you don't become the target. Rule 5. Nobody touches a till that isn't theirs. Money was the sharpest line in that place. Power could be negotiated. Bad counting turned into easy accusation. Those rules kept the club running like gears. And like all gears, it creaked. The creak showed up in small things. A laugh that got too loud. A glass set down too hard. A look from someone who'd arrived looking for someone. A man telling this story in a low voice on a porch might say the club was a place people went to ease their conscience, and without noticing, left pieces of it behind. And those pieces, one day, turned into evidence. Lila Mae had her own way of leaving nothing behind. She treated the job with near-religious care. She didn't accept drinks from customers. She didn't sit down at tables to keep company. She didn't let a hand linger on her shoulder longer than it had to. Her body was a tool, not an invitation. She kept a distance men respected because they understood. That distance wasn't coldness. It was law. Still, the town didn't care about nuance. To the town, a woman working in a place like that wore the same label no matter how she carried herself. Lila Mae knew it. That was why she kept one rule for herself, tighter than the rest. I don't give them a reason, but I don't lie for anybody either. That rule was dangerous in silence. On ordinary nights, nobody demanded a lie. They demanded only that you keep your mouth shut. But when something big happens, when an important man goes missing, when the law needs an answer, silence stops being enough. The town starts wanting you to say the right thing, and that's when your code becomes a problem. It was on one of those ordinary nights, just busy enough to be loud, just slow enough to be watched, that Eli Thibodeaux's son walked in for the first time. Though Lila Mae didn't know who he was yet, he came in early, before the rush, with the posture of a man who wasn't looking for trouble and wasn't interested in being noticed. His shirt was plain, but too clean for someone who hauled loads. Not rich man's clothes, office clothes, the kind that doesn't want to soak up smoke, but does anyway. He ordered coffee, paid right then, didn't try to make conversation, didn't look at Lila Mae with the kind of look she knew well, the look that measures a body and forgets there's a person attached. He looked like he was simply taking in the room. When she set the cup down, he said, "Thank you," in a voice low and straight, without extra, and as she turned to go, he added, "You stay open late out here, don't you?" It was a simple question, but the tone wasn't idle curiosity. It was a man needing an hour for a reason that mattered. Lila Mae answered the way she answered anybody who wanted to keep her at arm's length till the last table leaves. He nodded, like that was all he needed, and watched his coffee like he was thinking about something else. He left exact change, no looking back. Lila Mae only noticed then that Dupre had paused his rounds for a few seconds to watch the young man go, and Caleb, behind the bar, tracked that exit with the corner of his eye, like he could recognize a kind of trouble before it turned into trouble. That was the routine. Normal life, always carrying the shadow of what could happen. That same week, Deputy Harlan Petrie showed up 2 nights in a row. That wasn't common. When the deputy came too often, it meant talk was happening somewhere. Town hall talk, road talk, money talk. On the second night, he pulled Dupre aside near the kitchen, where the clatter of pots could swallow words. He spoke low, but Lila Mae, passing with a tray, saw his hand cut the air once in a short gesture. Dupre listened, nodded, and his smile shrank. After that, The place ran the same on the surface, but it wasn't the same. In a room like that, the difference isn't always what you see, it's what you feel. June grew more jumpy, like she sensed she'd landed in the wrong place at the wrong time. Caleb went quieter. Dupree started checking the till twice, and Lila Mae began filing away small details in her head without knowing why. She remembered the clean young man and the way he didn't seem at ease. She remembered the deputy coming too often. She remembered Dupree's eyes flicking toward the back door, and she remembered the cold weight of that ring in her pocket, not as temptation, but as warning. In that town, fate didn't arrive with trumpets. It came with coffee, ordered by a man who didn't belong, with a deputy sitting without drinking, with the back door opening one time too many. Later, the narrator would say that was how the week started tightening around Lila Mae, not with a storm, but with the air getting too heavy to breathe without noticing. And when the night of the disappearance finally came, everything that looked like routine, the tables, the glasses, the coffee, the back door messages, was already set to become evidence. All that was left was for the town to choose which story it wanted to tell. In that part of rural Louisiana, certain families didn't have to raise their voices to be heard. A last name did the work. The way a car stopped in front of the church did the work. The way people straightened their backs when a woman crossed the street in light gloves, even in heat that made the asphalt sweat, did the work. Thibodeaux was one of those names, and like any big name in a small town, its weight didn't come from money alone. It came from usefulness. Harold Thibodeaux was tied up in land, contracts, favors that moved hand to hand like worn bills. Men like that showed up in ribbon-cutting photographs and in backroom talk. The town needed him and pretended it didn't. But in this story, though nobody knew it yet, the first one to cross Lila Mae's path wasn't Harold. It was his son. His name was Eli Thibodeaux. Eli didn't enter rooms like a man arriving to be seen. He entered like a man trying to finish what he came for and get back out before something found him. He carried himself with a restraint that wasn't just good manners. It was something deeper. Every movement looked measured, like it had been practiced in front of a mirror that didn't forgive mistakes. When he'd come home from the war months earlier, the town expected him to come back normal. In that country, normal meant smiling at the right times, shaking hands firm, marrying a church girl, stepping into his father's business. It meant not talking about what he'd seen, not naming what he'd lost, not letting sadness show up like sickness. Eli tried, but war doesn't leave because you stop speaking about it. It stays in the way you shut a door, in the way you choose where to sit in a room, in the way you notice sounds nobody else hears. War becomes a private religion, full of rules and quiet. His mother, Evelyn, understood that better than the town would ever guess. Not because she'd been through the same places, but because she could read weakness the way other people read a contract. Evelyn Thibodeaux didn't need to shout to control a room. She controlled with presence. Clothes always chosen right, hair always set, a smile that didn't slip even when somebody said something ugly behind her back. She knew the difference between being loved and being obeyed. In that town, she learned early that obedience lasted longer. When Eli came home, she arranged his return like a public event, a thank you service at church, handshakes, coffee with committee women, the right table, the right word, a respectable job. Harold wanted his son close, of course, wanted him inside the family business. But Evelyn, always thinking 2 turns ahead, insisted on something else first. The bank. The bank was the town's hidden heart. It was where the good people went smiling, where the desperate went with their hat in their hands, and where decisions got made without looking like decision. At a bank, you could see who was rising and who was breaking, who had land and who had only promise, who owed whom. Evelyn knew that clean counter and those files were also a school in control, and control was what she wanted for her son. So Eli went to work there in accounts and lending. He wasn't manager. He wasn't owner. He was a young man in a pressed shirt, proper posture, and eyes that sometimes looked for an exit even when there was no danger in the room. The bank manager, friend of Harold, friend of the sheriff, friend of the preacher, welcomed Eli like he was an investment. That boy's going places, people said, like places were reached by willpower and not by luck. Eli did the work with precision, no mistakes in numbers, no missed signatures, no papers left out. He was good at it, but he didn't look happy. There was a kind of tiredness in him that didn't come from the job. It came from carrying the obligation to be what others needed him to be. At night, Evelyn tried to pull him into the town's rituals. Dinner at so-and-so's, a courtesy visit to thank somebody, a friendly conversation with a suitable church girl. Eli went sometimes, out of respect, but his eyes never stayed. It was like he was hearing something nobody else could hear. That's why, when he first showed up at Dupre's place, it wasn't because he wanted the road after dark. It was because of paperwork. At the bank, there was an old loan tied to Dupre, nothing illegal on paper, just the kind of small borrowing that keeps a business breathing. A late payment, a missing signature, a message that needed delivering without turning it into an official letter. In a small town, an official letter becomes shame. Shame becomes a fight. The manager looked at Eli and said like it was nothing. Go out there, talk to Dupre, keep it informal, just get it handled. Eli took the envelope, slid it into his pocket, and went. No glamour in it, just highway, heat, and that yellow light over the door. When he walked in, he did what disciplined men do, scanned the room fast, and chose a seat where he could see the front door and the bar without making a show of it. He ordered coffee, paid right away, kept his hands around the cup like it was an anchor. Lila Mae noticed him before she knew anything about him. She noticed the way he held his shoulders, not high, not aggressive, just ready. She noticed the way he said thank you without using his voice like a hook. She noticed how he didn't look at her the way so many men did, and in that place, that was rare enough to stick. Eli waited for the right moment and called Dupre over with a small gesture. No scene, no loud voice. When Dupre came close, Eli handed him the envelope like he was handing over an invoice. Dupre opened it, read it, and for a second his face tightened. Not fear, more like calculation. Eli said low, "Doesn't need a written reply. Just don't let this become talk." Dupre nodded. Then before Eli stood to leave, Dupre said something that wasn't a threat. It was advice. "You shouldn't be in here, son." Eli answered with the dry honesty of a man who didn't like circles. "I know." The conversation could have ended there, but as Eli got up, Lila Mae passed close with her tray, and for 1 second longer than was safe, their eyes met. Eli's look didn't ask for anything, didn't demand anything. It was simply recognition, like he'd seen not a girl from the club, but a person working, holding up the weight of the night. He said, almost without thinking, like he was talking to himself, "You all work too hard for this heat." Lila Mae could have answered with sharpness. She could have ignored him. Instead, she answered the way she always answered, when she wanted to close a door without sounding rude. "Heat doesn't ask if we can take it." Eli nodded like he understood more than the sentence, left the exact money, walked out. That was all. And still, it stayed. Because romance in that world didn't start with flowers. It started with a short sentence and a sense of respect. It started with someone looking at you without trying to own you. In the days that followed, Eli kept his routine at the bank. Stamps, signatures, polite talk. Evelyn noticed he was different, not by his face because Eli was good at hiding. Evelyn didn't need faces. She read what was missing. He was less willing to play certain social games, less interested in the right girls, quieter than usual. She didn't ask straight questions. Evelyn never asked straight questions. She planted them inside sentences. "You eating right, Eli? You sleeping? You've been driving a lot?" Eli answered with, "Yes, ma'am," and ended it. But Evelyn stored every answer like a chess piece. Harold, meanwhile, had his own restlessness. He'd been sharper than usual. He talked more in corners with people who didn't normally come to their house. He left at odd hours, came home late. When Evelyn asked, he answered with little patience. something that put a cold light in her eyes. She knew a life could come undone in a week. The town didn't know it yet, but something was moving beneath the floorboards. Eli started seeing signs without knowing they were signs. A man withdrawing cash in a sum that didn't match the life he lived. A rushed signature. A loan request that felt like a favor, not a need. To most people it was ordinary banking. To Eli, with that war-trained mind for what didn't fit, it tasted wrong. War does that. It teaches you to distrust normal. Meanwhile, at the club, Lila Mae kept working. The ring stayed in her pocket. She still didn't know whose it was. She only felt its weight, like a warning she hadn't earned. June kept trying to learn the rules, not knowing the rules would change the moment the town needed a story. And on a night when the room was fuller than usual, Eli came back. This time he didn't bring an envelope. He brought the same contained posture, but with a reason he couldn't name. He sat in the same spot, ordered coffee again. Lila Mae served him. He paid, and he stayed longer than he needed to. He didn't say anything that sounded like flirting. No compliments, just a careful question. "You been working here long?" Lila Mae, trained for dangerous questions, answered without opening a door. "Long enough." Eli gave a small half-smile, like he respected the boundary. My dad comes through here sometimes." Lila Mae felt her attention tighten. She didn't show it. She asked back, neutral as rain, "Your dad is..." Eli hesitated, not from pride, but because he knew saying the name out loud changed the temperature in a room. "Thibodeaux." Lila Mae didn't react. No widened eyes, no shift in tone. But inside, she understood. The ring in her pocket might weigh more than she'd thought. She said only, "A lot of folks come through." Eli nodded like that was relief. He didn't want her to confirm. He just needed to know whether his father's name had left a trail. In that short exchange, two people speaking plain in a common room, the quiet romance stopped being possibility and became risk, because Lila Mae realized that calm young man wasn't just any customer, and Eli realized that waitress wasn't part of the furniture. She was a witness in a town that didn't like witnesses. That same week, Evelyn heard a small comment from a church woman, said like it meant nothing. "Your Eli's been driving out on the highway a good bit, hasn't he?" Evelyn answered with a polite smile, neither confirming nor denying. But when she got home, she looked at her son with a new kind of attention, colder, sharper. She didn't ask where he'd been. She said only, "You don't need to go looking for trouble just to feel alive, Eli." Eli didn't answer, not because he agreed, because in that house, answering gave her room to tighten her grip. That night, heat pressing in and crickets outside insisting the world was normal, Eli lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, not from fear, but from the sense that something was about to happen, and when it did, the town would point at the wrong person first. Across the highway, Lila Mae closed up, wiped down the bar, and felt the ring in her pocket weighing heavier, like it had turned colder. She still didn't know how big what she carried was, but she already knew this much. When the Thibodeaux name walked into a room, nobody walked out untouched. The night Harold Thibodeaux disappeared didn't start with a warning. It started the way most nights started on that stretch of Louisiana. Heat stuck to the skin, mosquitoes that wouldn't quit, and people arriving tired of their own day. Early in the shift, Dupress Place felt like itself. The jukebox was playing something slow that nobody truly listened to. The kitchen made its steady racket, pots and spoons, that metallic clatter that announces food before it announces talk. Dupress moved between tables with the careful smile of a man keeping gears turning without letting oil drip on the floor. Caleb stood behind the bar, polishing glasses like each pass of the rag was a kind of prayer. Lila Mae worked at her usual pace, never rushing, never giving anyone an opening to measure her with their eyes. She knew where a night usually broke, near the stage, when the laughing got too loud, near the back door, when people who didn't want to be seen came in too late. She did what she always did: coffee, plates, change, a rag, calm as a person who'd learned not to move on impulse. June was quieter than normal, too quiet. Her hair wouldn't stay pinned right, and she kept tucking loose strands back, as if that could hold her nerves in place. Lila Mae noticed but didn't comment. In that room, comments were like winding a key you couldn't unwind later. Around 9, a group of millmen came in laughing, talking big, already asking for drink with their bodies before their mouths. They took their usual spot near the stage. The smell of oil and smoke came in with them. The night moved along. Lila Mae served 2 rounds, carried out hot plates, dumped ashtrays. She saw Caleb glance once toward the front door, like he was expecting somebody. Then close to 10, a car pulled into the gravel lot in a way that wasn't normal. It wasn't the car itself so much as the way it parked. Not up front, not under the brightest light, but off to the side, where the crooked trees threw shadow over the hood. The kind of clean car that didn't belong on that gravel. Its paint catching the yellow light like it was passing through, not staying. Lila Mae didn't turn to stare. She took it in the way she took in weather, corner of the eye, no drama, just information. The front door opened, and a man stepped in with a walk that tried to look ordinary. Light suit, tie loosened, hair combed, shoes cared for. But there was a tension on him. Not the tension of a man afraid of the place, but the tension of a man afraid of being seen inside it. He didn't make a show. He didn't greet anyone loud. He scanned the room once, quick, and chose the darkest corner table, away from the stage, away from the bar. A table where you could see the back door without looking like you were watching it. Lila Mae recognized Harold Thibodeaux before she heard the name, not because she knew him personally, but because small towns teach faces. Men like him showed up in newspaper photos, in church gatherings, in ribbon cuttings. You learn to recognize that posture, used to being served and still needing to pretend he didn't care. Dupree saw him too, and when Dupree saw, the room's temperature shifted, even if nobody could have explained it. Dupree went over with a kind of careful respect. "Evening, Mr. Thibodeaux," Harold answered with a short nod. No smile. "Just want to sit a bit," he said. Dupree nodded like it was any request at all, then asked, "You want anything?" Harold hesitated. Brief, but long enough for Lila Mae to catch it. Then he said, "Coffee." Caleb had the cup ready before Lila Mae even reached the bar. He poured fast and quiet, like he wanted the coffee on that table, and the man gone from the room. Lila Mae carried the cup over and set it down with the same neutral steadiness she used for everybody. Harold said thank you without looking up at her face too long, like looking left a mark. As she stepped away, she heard a chair scrape. It wasn't Harold. It was another man arriving. That second man came in through the back door. No announcement, just the door opening once and closing quick. He moved straight toward Harold's corner without greeting anyone, without ordering anything, without pausing to take the room in. Plain shirt, hat pulled low. The kind of man who doesn't want to be remembered and still never manages to be invisible. Lila Mae didn't know his face, but she knew the type. The type said, "Message." The man sat down without asking. He spoke low, so low Lila Mae couldn't catch words, but she saw Harold's jaw tighten. Harold touched his cup and didn't drink. His fingers tapped the table once like he was marking time only he could hear. Caleb kept polishing glasses, but his eyes weren't on the glass. They were on the room's reflection. Dupree pretended to tend a nearby table, but he planted himself where he could cut off trouble before it turned into trouble. He understood what it meant. An important man in a dark corner with another man who came in through the back. It meant problems. Near the stage, the millmen kept laughing. The jukebox kept playing. Life kept going. But in that corner, the night had become something else. 10 minutes passed, 15. Harold didn't touch his coffee. The man in the hat spoke. Harold answered in short bursts. At one point, Harold slid a hand inside his suit jacket pocket, like he was checking that something was still there. Then he glanced toward the back door. Quick, but not quick enough to hide. Lila Mae carried a plate to a nearby table, and when she came back, Harold was standing. The man in the hat that stood with him, not friendly, more like a guide. Harold laid bills on the table. He didn't wait for change. He didn't call anyone over. He walked toward the back door with the careful steps of a man crossing a bridge he didn't trust. Dupree moved to intercept with that practiced politeness. "You all right, Mr. Thibodeaux?" Harold stopped for 1 second and looked at him, and his answer sounded less like reassurance and more like warning. "I'm fine. Just don't want talk." Dupree nodded and stepped aside, because Dupree knew that when a man with a name asks for silence, it isn't really a request. Lila Mae watched the back door open and swallow both men. She saw the outside light flicker for a moment, like headlights shifting. Then the door closed, and the room filled back up with its normal noise, only now the noise didn't feel solid. She kept working, picked up cups, poured coffee, listened to a joke from a man who didn't deserve a reply, but inside, she was counting minutes against her will. Harold didn't come back, not in 5 minutes, not in 10, not when the jukebox song changed, not when the millmen paid and left, dragging their tired feet, not when June slipped to the kitchen for ice and returned pale, like she'd seen something outside and didn't dare say it. Dupree went out once to the parking lot, pretending he was checking the trash. He came back, quieter. Caleb set a glass down and stared at the back door, like he was staring at a wall that might fall. Near midnight, Eli Thibodeaux walked in through the front. No envelope this time. His face was controlled, too controlled. The kind of control that isn't calm. It's effort. He scanned the room like he was looking for someone without wanting anyone to see he was looking. He ordered coffee, but barely touched it. Dupree saw him and stiffened for a beat. He went over carefully. "Evening, Eli?" Eli nodded, eyes flicking toward the dark corner. "My dad come through here tonight." Dupree hesitated, and that hesitation was an answer. "Still," he said. "He did. Didn't stay long." Eli breathed in slow through his nose. "He leave out front." Dupree didn't like the question, not because he didn't know, because he knew answering tied the club to the Thibodeaux name in a way that could burn the place. "Back door," Dupree admitted. Eli went quiet, fitting pieces together. His eyes found Lila Mae for a second. Not flirtation, not anything soft, a mute request. She held his gaze and didn't look away. Then she turned and kept moving with her tray, but she felt something tighten in her chest because she understood then. This wasn't just a man missing. This was a powerful family about to grind whoever stood closest. Eli walked to the back door and stopped there without opening it, like he was listening for something beyond it. He returned to the table and said to Dupree, low, "If anyone asks, I wasn't here." Dupree nodded, unwilling. Eli turned and left fast, like he didn't want to be seen anywhere. The night ended without a blow-up, which was the most dangerous kind of ending. The club closed, lights went down. Caleb washed the last glass with too much care. Dupree locked the front door with 2 turns of the key. In the kitchen, Lila Mae gathered the last of the cups, and when she picked up the glass from that dark corner, the one from Harold's table, she felt something knock against the inside. She tipped it and saw the ring, the same ring that now seemed heavier than metal ought to be. She held it a moment, and the cold of it traveled up into her palm like a warning. June stepped into the kitchen right then, even paler than before, and whispered, he come back. Lila Mae didn't answer right away. She looked at June, then at the ring, then at the closed back door. "No," she said finally, "and you don't say that to anybody." June swallowed hard, like she wanted to ask more but couldn't find the courage. Lila Mae slipped the ring into her apron pocket, and in that exact moment she knew. When morning came, the town would need a story to explain why an important man vanished after visiting a place the town pretended didn't exist. And when a town needs a story, it chooses one that sounds clean, even if it has to dirty someone who can't defend herself. By morning, the heat was already standing up before most folks were. The sun came early and hard, throwing a clean light over everything. as if daylight had the power to drag truth out by the collar. But in rural Louisiana, people knew better. Daylight only shows what a town is willing to see. The first thing that traveled wasn't truth. It was the way doors closed. Harold Thibodeaux didn't show up for breakfast at his own house. He didn't show up at the bank. He didn't show up at the office. He didn't show up at the short little service he sometimes attended just to keep his name where it belonged. People with phones called people with more phones. People without phones heard it the old way, over a fence at the feed store, in the aisle at church. He didn't come home. Said like that, it sounded simple. But a small town can't live with simple when the missing man is important. Simple leaves space for questions, and questions are what frighten a community built on appearance. At first, there was still room for the idea that Harold had gone somewhere without telling anybody. Men in business did that sometimes. Ran out to close a deal, talked to someone in the next parish, handled something last minute. But the town also had another kind of knowledge, learned the hard way. When a man disappears without leaving a word, he's usually left the trouble behind. And trouble, if it's going to be bearable, has to be given a shape. By midday, the local paper, thin newsprint, ink that smudged your fingers, ran a small notice tucked between a truck for sale ad and a school item. Harold Thibodeaux, well-known local businessman, has been missing since last night. Authorities ask that any information be reported to the sheriff's office. Short, clean, almost too clean, like the paper didn't want to touch the story with bare hands. That was strange, because a small-town paper loves a big name. But a big name falling can splash ink on everybody. On the church, on the bank, on the advertisers who keep that paper alive. So the notice stayed small, and because it was small, it grew fast. What's small on paper gets big in mouths. Deputy Harlan Peter showed up at Dupro's place before the sun even thought about dropping. He came in without hurry, hat in his hand, stepping like he owned the floor. He didn't order a drink, didn't order coffee. He looked over the empty room like he was counting chairs. Dupre met him with the careful manners of a man who understood that lawmen didn't come there to talk truth. They came to mark territory. "Afternoon, Harlan." Dupre. Harlan stood there a moment until Dupre understood he wanted the conversation away from the bar. They moved near the kitchen where the clatter of pots could swallow words. Caleb kept wiping down the counter, but his rag moved slower. June hovered in the back, trying to become part of the wall. Harlan spoke low, but steady, the way a man speaks when he isn't asking. "Heard Thibodeaux was in here last night." Dupre hesitated. In that town, hesitation was halfway to confession. "He was," Dupre said at last. "What time?" "Couldn't say exact." Harlan tilted his head like the answer insulted him. "You can say exact, Dupre. You make a living knowing exact. Tell me, he leave out front or the back?" Dubaret's eyes flicked toward the back door, like that piece of wood could protect anyone. "Back," he said. Harlan breathed slow, the way he did when he was deciding what kind of trouble he wanted to create. "Who was he with?" Dupree didn't answer right away, and in that pause, Harlan looked over his shoulder and found June near the kitchen, holding a towel like it was something she could hide behind. Harlan's eyes stayed on her half a beat too long. It wasn't desire. It was appraisal. "Who was he with?" Harlan asked again, louder this time, so the room itself would hear. Dupre swallowed. "A man I didn't recognize." Harlan let out a short sound, almost a laugh, almost contempt. "You didn't recognize?" "Sure." He stepped closer, tightening the air between them and the girls. "Who was working?" Dupree understood where this was going. He couldn't stop it, because Harlan wasn't chasing truth. He was chasing the fastest way to end the town's discomfort. "Lila Mae," Dupree said, "and June, helping." Harlan looked at June again. June dropped her eyes fast. In a man like Harlan, fear always reads as either guilt or opportunity. "I want to talk to him." Dupree tried for neutral. Now. Lila Mae came out onto the floor with a clean apron and a quiet face. She didn't rush. She never rushed. Rushing makes a scene. A scene becomes talk. Talk becomes a story. And the town was already building one, piece by piece. Harlan looked her over like she was a tool, useful and disposable. "You saw Thibodeaux last night?" "I did. Talked to him, served him coffee." "He drunk?" "No." "He left alone?" Lila Mae weighed the question. and answered, exact. He left through the back door. Harlan narrowed his eyes. With who? Lila Mae didn't invent. With a man who came in the back. You know that man. No. Harlan paused, then tossed the next question like bait. And June? Lila Mae didn't take it. June worked. Same as me. Harlan turned on June. June opened her mouth, shut it again. Words wouldn't come because she could feel, without being able to explain, how any word could be turned into a noose. I was in the kitchen, she managed. Harlan stepped closer. But you went outside at some point. You saw something. June glanced at Dupree, then at Lila Mae, then back at Harlan with wet eyes. She had no family in town, no church behind her, no husband, no last name that could protect her. She had work and fear. I took out trash, she said, voice breaking. And Harlan pressed. June's breathing went quick. I saw a car parked out there, but I don't know. I don't know who it was. Harlan nodded like that was enough. There we go. You saw. Then he looked back at Lila Mae. And you didn't see anything? Lila Mae kept her face still. I saw what I said. Harlan let the silence stretch, training the room to accept the version he wanted. Then he said louder, so even the walls could repeat it later. Somebody saw more than they're telling. He didn't have to point. A town learns quick who it's allowed to point at. June felt the weight before any charge was spoken. Her shoulders folded in like the room itself was pushing on her. Harlan asked more questions, all aimed the same direction, where June had been, who she talked to, whether anybody offered her a ride, what kind of friends she had, whether she knew men's business. He wasn't asking to learn, he was asking to build. When he was done, he walked to the door, paused, and looked back at Dupree. I'll be back. Dupree didn't answer. He only nodded. After Harlan left, the club felt quieter than it usually did in daylight. June started crying without sound. Small, contained tears, like even crying could become evidence. Lila Mae didn't comfort her with hugs or soft talk. She just stepped close enough to be there and said low, "Listen to me. You don't say anything else. Not to me. Not to anybody." June shook her head, terrified. "But I saw the car." Lila Mae cut her off, firm. "You saw a car. That won't do anything but put you in his sights." June swallowed hard. "He's gonna say it was me." Lila Mae didn't give her a sweet lie. She gave her the hard truth. He's gonna say whatever's easiest. That night, the talk had already shifted from "Where is Harold?" to "Who was he with?" And once the question becomes who, the town starts sorting people by usefulness. Respectable people become victims. Unprotected people become suspects. Evelyn Thibodeaux showed up at church the way she always did. Posture perfect, face calm, no outburst, no public begging. She let the women approach with prayers and hand squeezes because she understood the local rule. A strong woman has to look fragile in the right amount. At the same time, she sent messages. The newspaper editor got a friendly visit. The sheriff got a long phone call. Important people began repeating short phrases like they'd been rehearsed. Something about that place. That road brings trouble. Those girls. Each sentence was a brick in a wall. At Dupree's, the cash drawer got counted like it could protect a man. Caleb washed glasses a little too hard. Lila Mae felt the ring in her pocket like a stone tied to her body. And June. June was already condemned without a single piece of paper. Condemned by convenience. The sun dropped and night came back. The club opened again because bills don't wait for tragedy. But this time, the front door felt like it was opening into something different. When the first customers came in, Lila Mae caught the looks. They weren't the old looks, not desire, judgment. The kind that said, "We know you're guilty. Now we just have to decide which one of you." And in the middle of it, she understood something plain. The town had made its choice too early. Now she had to decide whether she'd let that choice stand or pay the price of stopping it. By the second day without Harold Thibodeaux, the town had done what small towns do when they don't want to stare into an empty space. It started filling it with aversion. Aversion is comfort. You can sleep with aversion. The truth sometimes won't let you. Evelyn Thibodeaux understood that before the sheriff did, before the newspaper editor did, before the church women gathered on sidewalks with folded hands and murmured prayers. She understood it because her life had always been built on one clean rule. When something threatens to fall, you hold the image first. You deal with the rest afterward, if you can. That morning she dressed like it was Sunday, not because she planned to pray, but because clothing out there was language. She chose a dark dress, elegant without being flashy, and pinned her hair with a firmness that didn't allow a single strand to misbehave. From a distance, the town would call it dignity, and dignity was what she needed them to see. She didn't go to Dupra's place. She wouldn't put herself inside that building while the smell of it was still fresh in the town's memory. Going there would be admitting the club truly existed on the town's moral map. Evelyn didn't make admissions that could be used against her name. She went where the town made decisions without looking like it was making decisions. First, she went to church, not to cry into a wooden pew, but to be seen, so the women could touch her arm, press her hand, offer prayers and help, and she could receive it with a sorrow measured just right. Too much sorrow looks like theater, too little looks like cold. Evelyn knew how to measure. Then she went to the newspaper office. The paper ran out of a narrow building that smelled of ink and old fan heat. The editor was the kind of man who owed favors to half the county and took advertising money from the other half. He saw Evelyn step through the door and straightened up, not from pure respect, instinct. Women like her carried consequences with them. Evelyn didn't ask to sit. She sat like she had a right. "I saw the notice," she said calmly. "I appreciate you keeping it discreet." The editor cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am, we just want to help." Evelyn inclined her head, as if acknowledging effort. "That's all I'm asking. Help. This town doesn't need hysteria. My husband will be found. And if he isn't, we'll handle it with seriousness. Not spectacle." She didn't say, "not scandal." She said, "not spectacle." It sounded better and meant the same thing. The editor nodded fast. Evelyn opened her purse with delicate care and took out a folded sheet. Names, numbers, reminders of old donations and event sponsorships. The kind of quiet list that kept a small-town paper breathing. "I know you live on advertising and trust," she said, "and trust is fragile when people start talking about what they don't understand." The editor looked at the list and understood. Evelyn didn't have to threaten. She just had to show she knew where the pressure points were. She folded the paper and put it away. "Print only what's confirmed," she concluded, "and keep the focus on the search. No speculation." The word left her mouth clean and landed heavy. From the newspaper, she went to the sheriff's office. The sheriff was a man who liked calm. Calm kept elections. Calm kept business. Calm kept the church at peace. But calm also has a cost, and sometimes that cost is choosing a culprit quickly. Evelyn was received with manners, offered a chair, offered water, offered condolences as if she were already a widow. She accepted the chair and nothing else. "I didn't come here to cry," she said. "I came to understand what you're going to do about this." The sheriff laced his fingers together. "We're investigating, Mrs. Thibodeaux." Investigating was a big word. Evelyn's eyes stayed steady. "I want to know whether you're going to let this town turn into a circus," she said. "I want to know whether you'll allow my husband's name to get dragged through porch talk." The sheriff tried to soften it. "People are saying he was seen at Dupree's." No, Evelyn didn't react like she'd been surprised. She reacted like she despised the need to even say it aloud. "A man can walk into a place and still be a man," she said. "That doesn't give anyone permission to turn his name into mud." The sheriff nodded like he agreed. Evelyn leaned forward just enough to make the next words feel private, even in that office. "I grew up here," she said. "I know what people do when they get scared. They point, and I won't allow them to point in the wrong direction. And in the process, open a door nobody can close." The sheriff heard the subtext. If this story spun out of control, it could pull on business, contracts, friendships, names that looked clean on Sunday and weren't so clean on Monday. "We'll proceed carefully," he promised. Evelyn's smile was small. "Careful is a pretty word," she said. "I prefer efficient." She stood, and before she left, she tied the sheriff with a sentence that didn't sound like a rope until it was already around a man's neck. "My son trusts you in that town." That meant more than a threat. It meant a bill. When Evelyn got home, Eli was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee gone cold. looking out at the yard without really seeing it. He looked older than he was. His face was hard, not anger, just restraint. "You've been out there," Evelyn said. Not a question. Eli didn't move. "I went to handle bank business." Evelyn stood still a moment, studying him the way a woman studies a crack in a wall. "Don't handle anything alone anymore." Eli finally looked up. "I'm not a child." Evelyn gave him a short smile. "You came back from war, Eli. That doesn't make you immune to what this town does to people who get too close to the wrong side of the highway." "The wrong side," Eli said, and there was something sharp in it. "Is people working, Mama?" Evelyn tilted her head. "Of course, and that's why we feel sorry for them. But pity doesn't change the world. Names do." Eli tightened his grip on the cup. "My father didn't come home." "I know," Evelyn said, still controlled, "and that's why you're going to listen to me now. If your father doesn't come back, they're going to want a reason, and the easiest reason always lives in a place this town already despises." She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "I'm not going to let them drag our family down with it." Eli went quiet. War had trained him to recognize an order disguised as advice. The difference was, in this house, the weapon wasn't a rifle, it was reputation. That same afternoon, Evelyn sent word to Dupre, not a written message, nothing you could hold up in court, just someone stopping by and saying, "Mrs. Thibodeaux would like this to end without confusion." Messages in a small town are always a thread. Pull it wrong, and it becomes a noose. Dupre received the word and swallowed. He knew Evelyn's reach. He also knew that when a powerful family decides something must be clean, the ground under everybody else turns to mud. That evening, a churchwoman, one of those who knows everything and never admits it, stopped Lila Mae as she was stepping out and said in a soft voice, "Child, you ought to be careful. People are talking." Lila Mae answered politely, "People always talk." The woman squeezed her arm with a kind of false affection. "Mrs. Thibodeaux is suffering, and when powerful people suffer, it tends to spill onto others." Lila Mae understood the warning. It wasn't a direct threat. It was the town's elegant way of saying, "You're in the path." When she stepped back inside, she saw Harlan Peter sitting again, watching June like he'd already written her name in his head. Dupre's smile was smaller. Caleb was quieter, and Lila Mae realized something. While the deputy was manufacturing a suspect, Evelyn was manufacturing silence. The town now had one hand on the gas and the other on the throat, and between those two hands, Lila Mae carried a ring in her pocket and a code that hadn't been built to survive a woman like Evelyn Thibodeaux. That week, the road between town and Dupre's place felt shorter for anybody with a reason and longer for anybody with fear. The heat didn't let up, but what tightened in Lila Mae's chest wasn't the weather. It was the sense that the whole town had turned its face toward her, like somebody had switched on an invisible spotlight. She kept working the same way, same pace, same tray, same polite voice. If she changed her rhythm, they'd call it a reason. And her code, learned at her mother's kitchen table, was simple. Don't give them a reason. But there are things no code can hold back forever. June started showing up early and leaving late, like her body was trying to prove innocence through exhaustion. She did too much, wiped tables twice, washed glasses that were already clean, and every time tires crunched on gravel outside, her face changed before the door even opened. Deputy Harlan Peter came back again and again, always the same hour, never in a hurry. He'd sit and watch. He wasn't the kind of man who liked loud interrogation in front of witnesses. That made a show. He preferred pressure that worked slow. A question here, a comment there, a long pause that let fear fill the space. One night, when Lila Mae passed with coffee, Harlan spoke like he was talking about the weather. "That new girl, June, right? She ain't from here." Lila Mae didn't stop. She answered, moving, the way you answer when you refuse to give a man a foothold. "She works." Harlan smiled with his mouth. "Work ain't a last name." Then he let the sentence hang there, letting the idea grow on its own. That was how he planted things. Dupre tried to keep the place alive. He needed customers, needed cash, but now money arrived with hard looks attached. Men came in and, before they ordered a drink, they stared at June like she was a headline. That was worse than an insult. It was a sentence dressed up as curiosity. Caleb got quieter, too, not out of cowardice, out of calculation. He watched the kind of danger that doesn't come with a knife. It comes with a pen, and in that town, the pen usually won. It was on one of those nights, busy enough to blur talk, quiet enough to feel watched, that Eli Thibodeaux came back. He walked in through the front without a suit jacket, plain shirt, clean, hair combed the way it always was, but his face carried the mark of a night without sleep. The way he looked around wasn't a man looking for fun. It was a man looking for what didn't fit. He sat in his usual spot, ordered coffee, paid right away, an old habit that now felt like he was trying not to owe a thing to anyone. Lila Mae carried the cup over with the same neutrality she always used. She knew what it meant to have a Thibodeaux sitting there during a week like this. It meant risk. It meant somebody would notice, and if they noticed, the first person judged wouldn't be him. She set down the cup. Eli said thank you, and as she turned to go, he asked, low enough that the table became its own world, "He come back?" Lila Mae didn't answer right away. Not for drama, prudence. Answers were steps toward a cliff. "I don't know," she said at last. It was true. Harold hadn't returned to the club. What happened beyond that back door she hadn't seen. Eli held the cup without drinking. "You saw him leave." "I did." "With who?" Lila Mae felt the ring in her pocket, like a weight reminding her it was there. She gave him only what she could. "With a man." Eli nodded slowly, jaw tight, like he was holding something back. "My mama says I shouldn't be here." Lila Mae looked at him longer than service usually allowed. Not curiosity, assessment. Evelyn's son, sitting there, looked less like power and more like tired. "She's right," Lila Mae said, simply. Eli let out a breath through his nose, almost a laugh that never became one. "I know." The conversation should have ended there. Maybe it would have, if the world wasn't squeezing. But when pressure builds, it pushes people into places they never meant to stand. Eli lowered his voice even more. "If anybody asks, I wasn't here either." Lila Mae understood. He wasn't protecting her. He was protecting his position. Still, she respected the honesty. "I don't talk about what I'm not asked," she said. It was a kind of agreement, short and dry, the way agreements are between people who don't have the luxury of pretending. That same night, June passed Eli's table carrying plates and nearly dropped one when she caught Harlan watching from across the room. The plate tapped the tray, a small sound, but enough to pull attention. Harlan's eyes slid to Eli. He recognized the name without hearing it. His little smile disappeared for a heartbeat, replaced by quick math. He understood something had changed. A Thibodeaux boy sitting in the same place where a girl from the club moved around. That could be a weapon, either way. When Lila Mae went into the kitchen for more coffee, she found June frozen near the sink, hands shaking. "He's gonna take me," June whispered without looking up. Lila Mae closed the kitchen door gently, not to hide secrets, but to keep June's fear from becoming sound the whole room could swallow. "Who?" she asked, though she already knew. "The deputy," June said. "He's just waiting on me to say one wrong thing." Lila Mae knew it was true, and she also knew in that town, a wrong word didn't have to be wrong. It only had to be useful. "Then don't give him words," Lila Mae said. June shook her head, desperate. "I can't. I don't know what I did." Lila Mae didn't have a pretty answer. She had the one life teaches. You're in the right place for them to blame you. That's it. June bit her lip hard to keep from crying out. "You gonna leave me alone?" That question went through Lila Mae like cold steel. Not because it was accusation, but because it was true. Lila Mae had built her life on not tying herself to people. But now there was a girl with a rope already around her neck, and the town was pulling. "I won't hand you over," Lila Mae said, and in saying it, she felt the line she'd crossed, because not handing someone over is a commitment, and commitment costs. When she stepped back out into the room, Eli was staring at the back door like his eyes could pull time backward. He didn't notice her at first. Then she set the coffee pot down near him. Eli said, without lifting his voice, "They're pointing at her, aren't they?" Lila Mae didn't ask who. they were. That week, they was everybody. They're pointing at what's easiest, she said. Eli went quiet. Then, like he was confessing something he hadn't wanted to say out loud, my daddy had enemies. Lila Mae didn't look surprised. A man with a big name always has enemies. But what she heard wasn't information. It was the first crack in the Thibodeaux wall. Everybody does, she said. Only not everybody's got people to cover for 'em. Eli looked at her with a more serious kind of respect than before. Not romance in words, romance in recognition. He saw she knew how to live in a world that offered no forgiveness. When he left, he tipped the right amount. Not big enough to look like a purchase, not small enough to be an insult. And as he stood, he said only, "If I find something, I'll come back." Lila Mae nodded. She didn't thank him. Thanks would have been closeness, and closeness, right then, was dangerous. After Eli walked out, Dupree appeared at Lila Mae's shoulder like he'd been waiting. "You gotta be careful," he said low. "People are gonna see that." "I didn't do anything," Lila Mae answered. Dupree made a short, frustrated gesture. "Doesn't matter. Out here, looking like it is half the crime." Across the room, Harlan watched June, and over June, he watched Lila Mae. And for the first time, Lila Mae felt the focus could shift. June was the easy target, but Lila Mae was becoming the problem that didn't fit. Later, near closing, when the noise dropped and the club held that leftover silence, Lila Mae went to the little corner where she kept simple things. Rags, coins, a pencil. She touched the ring through her apron pocket, still cold as ever. Outside, a car rolled by, slow, and for a moment she held her breath. She didn't go to the window. She didn't give a reason. But inside, she knew. Evelyn's hand was tightening, and now there was another danger mixed in. The son, with his watchful eyes and his position at the bank. If Eli found something in those papers, if he brought back proof the town couldn't bend. Lila Mae looked at the back door, shut tight, and thought how sometimes the world brings you a way back through the same door that swallowed someone. But in that town, the ones who open doors too wide get shoved out first. And with that knowledge, clear as the ring's cold weight, she finished her shift, not yet knowing that at the bank, a piece of paper was waiting that could speak louder than any whisper. At the bank, the air smelled like old paper and floor wax. It was a clean place, built to project calm, as if calm were a promise. But Eli Thibodeaux had learned that clean didn't always mean clean. Sometimes it only meant somebody had scrubbed hard. On the third morning, he got there earlier than usual, not because he was trying to impress anyone, though he did his job right, but because sleep had gotten scarce. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet in his house like the quiet was saying something. His father's absence was a sound. His mother moving through rooms with controlled footsteps was another. Eli walked into the bank with his head down and one clear purpose: stop accepting a ready-made story. He didn't have formal authority to investigate anything, and he didn't think of himself as an investigator. He was just a man with access to what other people called paperwork. Only paperwork is where the real world hides when it doesn't want to stand out in public. He started where he could pretend it was routine. Recent movements tied to the accounts his father touched most often. Harold Thibodeaux wasn't just one account. There were promissory notes, contract payments, money moving in and out in ways that kept half the town's hands fed. The bank manager drifted near Eli's desk like it was casual. "You doing all right, son?" Eli nodded, just trying to understand. The manager gave the counter a light tap, like consolation. "Understanding won't bring your daddy back." It could have been care. It could have been warning. Eli heard warning. "I need to know what there is to know," he said. The manager didn't push further, but his eyes sharpened. Eli felt it, so he worked even more carefully. He didn't pull files out where anybody could see. He didn't leave drawers open. He wrote numbers in a small notebook like they were for him alone, not for the bank. That's when he saw something that didn't match his father. A large cash withdrawal made the afternoon before the disappearance. It wasn't an impossible amount for Harold, but the method was wrong. Cash, no clear reason attached, and a signature that looked hurried. Harold signed like a man laying down law. steady, clean. This looked like a hand that was rushing, or a hand under pressure. Eli leaned closer and felt that old war instinct. Something doesn't fit. He checked the ledger, checked the teller log. One teller said it had been Mr. Harold's request, but the teller was young and carried the kind of fear you learn fast when a big name walks up to your window. Eli asked, keeping his voice neutral, who was with him. The young man blinked. With him? When he withdrew it, the teller hesitated, glanced around like the walls could listen. There was a man, county man, maybe, I don't know. He stayed close, talked low. Name? Eli asked. The teller shook his head, and Eli understood. It wasn't that the boy didn't know. It was that he couldn't say. Eli wrote the time, the amount, and the odd signature in his notebook. Then he closed everything up and went back out front, like it was just another day. From the lobby, the bank stayed the same. Inside Eli's head, the first stone had come loose. When the day ended, he didn't go straight home. He drove to the part of town where men who did county work tended to linger. A small store. A place where talk lived. He didn't walk in, asking names. War had taught him that straight questions raise weapons. He bought a pack of cigarettes he didn't even smoke, and listened. Two men were talking low near the counter. "This'll fall on that girl," one said. "Always does." Eli didn't interrupt. He just stored it. Then he headed to the one place he knew his father's absence had left a concrete mark. Dupre's. When he walked in, the room was half full, music low. Dupre looked more tired than usual. Caleb was behind the bar. June moved like she was carrying glass in her hands. Lila Mae saw Eli come in and felt her body tighten, not because she wanted it to, because his presence had become a spark near dry paper. Eli sat, ordered coffee, paid on the spot. When Lila Mae brought the cup, he spoke without ceremony, but low enough to keep it between them. "Your name's Lila Mae, right?" She paused, a heartbeat, not because it was secret, but because it was rare for someone to want her full name without an angle. "It is," Eli nodded. "I found something at the bank." Lila Mae didn't change her face. She pulled a chair a fraction closer. Close enough to hear, far enough not to look like familiarity. Eli slipped his notebook out and, instead of showing official papers, he wrote a few numbers on a napkin. Time, amount, a little mark for the signature. He withdrew a big cash amount before he came here, Eli said, and there's something off about the signature. Lila Mae looked at the numbers and understood two things at once. First, Eli was risking his job even sitting there talking like this. Second, those same facts could cut her if they got into the wrong mouth. "Why are you telling me?" she asked. Eli looked down at his coffee, then back up. "Because they're aiming at the new girl," he said, "and it doesn't make sense." Across the room, June flinched as the front door opened, and Harlan Peter walked in. The deputy didn't come to watch Eli. He came to watch June, and over June, to watch the whole room. Lila Mae said quietly, "They don't need sense." Eli answered just as quietly, "I do." That sentence told Lila Mae more than any confession could. Eli wasn't there because he wanted to be brave, and he wasn't there because he was chasing some easy romance. He was there because there was a moral crack in him his mother couldn't cover. Lila Mae made a small decision then. She wouldn't give him everything yet, but she would put enough weight on the table to anchor truth to the floor. "I've got something," she said, "but I'm not taking it out here." Eli frowned. "Something like what?" "Something a man doesn't leave behind if he walks out on purpose." Eli held still a moment. Then he nodded, understanding the boundary. "I need to see it. You'll see it when I decide it's safe," Lila Mae said. Not defiance. Survival. Eli drew a slow breath. "My mama's moving people," he admitted. "I can see it. I know her." Lila Mae didn't comment. Commenting on Evelyn was poison. Right then, Caleb passed by their table to collect a glass. He didn't look at them straight on, but he paused half a beat longer than necessary. Eli noticed and spoke low. "Caleb." Caleb looked over without surprise. Eli didn't ask for a favor. He asked a plain question. "You remember what time Harold left here?" Caleb could have pretended he didn't hear, could have said, "Don't know." That was the unwritten rule. Instead, he glanced at Lila Mae, not asking for permission, but asking a different question. "Can you live with the price of this?" Lila Mae met his eyes and held them steady. No heroism, just decision. Caleb answered in a voice as neutral as weather. Little after 10:20 at the latest. Eli wrote it down, and he left with somebody. Eli pressed. Caleb made the smallest gesture with his chin, pointing without pointing. Man came in through the back, hat pulled low. Eli nodded. That was confirmation. Bank paper plus bartender time made a track. What he didn't have yet was the name of the man in the hat, and that's where things get dangerous. Harlan Piter stood and drifted toward the bar, like he was going to order water. He stopped a little too close, listening to what he wasn't supposed to hear. Caleb kept his face calm. Eli went quiet. Lila Mae turned away to wipe down a table that didn't need wiping. Harlan looked at Lila Mae and said soft as honey, "You've been talking to important folks." Lila Mae answered in her usual calm, "I talk to whoever asks for coffee." Harlan smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Careful, Lila. People get burned for less." She didn't answer. Answers become steps. But inside she understood. The deputy had noticed pieces moving, and once a man like Harlan notices, he tries to close the game before truth finds a door. Near the end of the night, after the room thinned out, Eli stood to leave and spoke low. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, "and I'll bring you a name." Lila Mae nodded, and for the first time that week, her voice carried something like hope. Not sweet hope, but hard hope, made of facts. "Then I'll show you what I've got." Eli walked out the front door like he didn't want to be followed. Lila Mae watched him a moment, then went right back to work. Because in that town, the road to a happy ending never starts with celebration. It starts with ordinary people, collecting proof in silence, while holding steady under pressure, without breaking. The next morning the town woke up, under the same bright sun and the same talk, only sharper. The paper hadn't changed its wording, but people's voices had. When a disappearance lasts past the first shock, it stops being a scare and becomes a tool. And a tool, out there, always finds a hand. June showed up for her shift, looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes stayed low, and her hands stayed busy. Rag, plate, glass, anything that kept someone from seeing them tremble. Lila Mae saw it and understood. Fear in a young woman shows in the details, and men who hunt for a culprit love detail. Dupré looked worse, too. He wasn't just a man trying to keep the doors open anymore. He was a man trying to keep his head out of the town's guillotine. His voice came shorter, drier. He counted the cash drawer twice, and between tables kept looking toward the highway, like he expected the sheriff's truck to roll in and finish him. Caleb stayed quiet, but his quiet had changed. It wasn't hiding. It was the quiet of a man who'd already decided, just not picked the moment. Around 8, Deputy Harlan Piter walked in again. This time, he didn't sit. He went straight toward the kitchen as if the club was an extension of his office. Dupré tried to intercept him, but Harlan brushed past with a later that didn't sound polite. June was in the kitchen helping slice bread when Harlan stepped through. The color left her face so fast it looked like it had been pulled. Lila Mae came in right behind, using coffee as an excuse. But the truth was simple. She wasn't leaving June alone. Harlan looked at June and said, like he was announcing weather, "You're coming with me." June choked on air. Now. Dupré appeared at the doorway, trying to keep some kind of control. "Harlan, she's working." Harlan didn't even look at him. "She's interfering." June started to cry, but she tried to keep it silent. Tears fell like her body had given up on holding itself together. "I didn't do anything," she whispered. Harlan tilted his head, like he'd heard something interesting. "That's not for you to decide." Lila Mae felt heat rise in her chest, but didn't show it. Shouting would give the deputy exactly what he wanted, a scene. And in that town, every scene comes with a ready-made guilty party. She spoke low, firm. "She'll go, but you're not hauling her out like an animal." Harlan turned his eyes toward Lila Mae and gave a thin smile. "Well, look at you, saint of the highway." Lila Mae didn't bite. "She goes the right way," she repeated. Harlan stepped closer, crowding space on purpose. "You've been stepping in too much, Lila." Before she could answer, Dupré snapped, voice hard. "That's enough, Harlan." Harlan looked at Dupré like he'd forgotten his place. "You want me to remind the town council about your license?" Dupré went still, The threat had landed. Harlan grabbed June's arm, not beating her, not showing violence the way a courtroom would recognize, but with the practiced firmness of a man used to not being challenged. June let out a small, broken sound. Lila Mae stepped forward, then stopped. She knew the line between courage and foolishness. If she crossed it right there, June would still be taken, and Lila Mae would lose whatever position she still had. June was let out the kitchen door like someone walking into a place she might not come back from. In that moment, Lila Mae understood. Waiting one more day meant losing June for good. The town was speeding up. There wasn't room anymore for caution that only protected the powerful. Across town, at the bank, Eli Thibodeaux moved through the day pretending it was normal. He stamped papers, helped customers, smiled the right amount. Inside, he was operating the way war teaches a man to operate. When he's preparing to move through danger, he had found a name. Not a full name written neat on a document. The kind of name you hear at the store counter. Passed low. Lemarque, a man who did odd work for important people, handled matters without stepping into light, not the boss of anything, a tool, and tools, when used wrong, leave marks. Eli found the name the way he'd found other things since coming home, listening without asking too much, collecting loose sentences, crossing them against paper. The cash withdrawal had ended up in someone's hand, and that someone had spent a small part of it at the store, with a bill that still smelled like the bank. People who were broke noticed that smell. They just didn't mention it unless they trusted who was listening. When the bank closed, Eli didn't go home. He drove straight to Dupre's. He walked in and could tell immediately something had shifted. June wasn't there. The room felt heavier. Dupre looked like a man standing on rotten boards. Lila Mae brought Eli coffee without speaking in front of anyone. Eli barely touched it, then said low, "He took her." Lila Mae nodded. "Today." Eli closed his eyes for a quick second. When he opened them again, there was decision in them. "I've got a name," he said. Lila Mae didn't ask him to repeat. She just tipped her head. "Go on, Lemarque." I tied him to the cash withdrawal. Lila Mae's heart beat harder, but her face stayed the same. "Is that enough?" she asked. "Not to bring down my mother," Eli said, blunt and honest, "but it's enough to pull this out of the deputy's hands." Lila Mae thought fast. The sheriff was a calm man, and calm in a town like that could mean doing what Evelyn wanted. The deputy was a results man, and results to him meant sacrificing June, so they needed a third hand. Someone above the town. "State," Lila Mae said. "District office." Eli nodded. He'd been thinking it too. He just hadn't admitted he was willing to cross that line. "If I do that, I lose the bank," he said. "I lose my name here." Lila Mae looked at him. No pity in it. Respect. "A name don't mean much if it's only good for crushing people," she said. Eli held her gaze a beat. That was the moment the romance stopped being a quiet feeling and turned into an alliance. It wasn't, "I like you." It was, "I'm taking the risk with you." Then Lila Mae did her part. She led Eli back into the kitchen, away from the room. Caleb was there, washing glasses. Dupree pretended to count plates. They all listened. Nobody interrupted. Lila Mae reached into her apron pocket and brought out the ring, setting it in her palm like she was laying down evidence, not jewelry. Eli stared at it and went rigid. He knew it. "That's my daddy's," he said, and his voice cracked for half a second, just enough to remind you he was a son before he was a name. Lila Mae didn't apologize for keeping it. There was nothing to apologize for. "I found it in his glass," she said. "A man doesn't leave that behind if he's walking out on purpose." Eli closed his fist around the ring. The motion was small, but it carried the weight of a funeral that hadn't happened yet. Without looking up, Caleb spoke low, like he was talking to the water running in the sink. "Now you've got two things that shouldn't exist together, paper and object." Dupre turned his head, uneasy. "You bringing the state down on me?" he whispered. Eli answered steady. "If I don't, they'll bury that girl alive." Dupre swallowed. He was a survival man, not a virtue man. But even men like that have a line. Do what you have to do, Dupré said, finally. Just don't leave me alone when the door starts slamming. Lila Mae didn't promise to save Dupré. She only promised what her code allowed, by the steadiness in her eyes. I won't lie, that's when Evelyn's machine tried to move. Later that night, when Eli left Dupré's place, a pickup rolled up beside him slow enough to feel intentional. The window slid down. A man from the Thibodeaux circle, always smiling at church events, leaned an elbow on the door. "Eli," he said, like it was friendly. "Your mama's worried." Eli kept his face flat. "She always is." The man's smile tightened. "Come on home. Let the grown folks handle this." Eli understood. A message. He didn't answer. He just drove off. On the way, he made the final decision. Before dawn, he would call someone outside this town, someone who didn't depend on the Thibodeaux name to buy groceries. And across the highway, Lila Mae locked up after closing and understood there was no walking backward now. June was in the deputy's hands. The ring was in the son's hand. And the truth, finally, had started to move. When truth starts moving, it makes noise, and in that town, noise always costs. But for the first time since the night Harold vanished, Lila Mae felt something that wasn't fear. It was direction. A straight line, at last. Through all that mud, the answer didn't come the way people expect answers to come in big city stories. It didn't come with sirens, cameras, or a crowd at the sheriff's door. It came the way truth usually comes when it's been pushed down hard, through a crack, insisting until it becomes a path. Eli made the call before daylight from the most discreet phone he could get to, tucked in a corner of the bank where nobody lingered after hours. The town slept, but the state didn't sleep the same way. On the other end of the line, a tired voice heard the name Thibodeaux without getting impressed, and that alone felt like relief. Eli spoke like a man who understood every word could become a rope. "My father's missing. There's a cash withdrawal, a signature that doesn't match, a middleman folks recognize, and there's a witness being used as a scapegoat." The voice on the line didn't promise miracles. It promised presence. "Don't touch anything else," the man said. "Keep what you've got safe. We'll be there before day's end." When Eli hung up, he didn't feel victory. He felt the weight of the step he'd taken. In a small town, bringing in outsiders is like calling in a hard storm. You solve one problem and create another. But June was in the deputy's hand, and that left Eli no room for regret. By morning, the air felt heavier, not because of the heat, because of waiting. At Dupré's, Dupré opened up like a man opening a courtroom. Caleb stood behind the bar, quiet, eyes watching the gravel lot. Lila Mae got there early and found the place too clean. Dupré had scrubbed the floor like he could erase footprints, but a town's footprints don't wash out with a mop. June didn't show. Lila Mae asked Dupré once. Only once. He let her go. Dupré shook his head without meeting her eyes. "She's still there." Office. Lila Mae felt her stomach go hard. She pictured June sitting in a stiff chair, listening to questions that weren't meant to find anything, only meant to squeeze until she said what they needed her to say. It wasn't investigating. It was manufacturing. Late morning, two unfamiliar cars rolled into town. Not sheriff's vehicles. Plain cars, no markings, but with that way of moving that didn't ask permission. Men in light shirts stepped out with folders in hand. One stopped at the gas station and asked for directions to the sheriff's office. Another went straight to the bank. The bank manager went pale. He tried to smile, but it didn't take. "This really necessary?" he asked, like he was still used to controlling things. The state man answered with short politeness, "It is." Eli was called into a small room. Not a courtroom, a paper room. He gave what he had, the withdrawal record, the time, the amount, the signature that didn't sit right. He didn't dress it up. He didn't have to. Paper speaks. Then he handed over the ring. When the investigator held the metal and saw the worn initials inside, his face changed just enough for Eli to know the ring carried weight. A rumor never could. A rumor can be denied. A married man's ring with initials has to be explained. From the bank, the state men went to the sheriff's office. The sheriff tried to keep his man of the town posture, but when he saw them, His body betrayed him. Relief tangled with fear. Relief because responsibility was shifting upward. Fear because when it shifts, it pulls along anyone who helped shove it. Deputy Harlan Piter stepped in with his hat in his hand. Jaw set. "What's going on?" he demanded. The lad investigator didn't raise his voice. "We're taking over part of this." Harlan tried to stake territory. "This is my jurisdiction." The investigator looked at him like he was a signpost in the road. Jurisdiction isn't a shield when you're building a suspect without evidence. It was the first time anyone had spoken to Harlan like that in that town. June was brought out. She stepped into daylight with red eyes but still standing, holding herself together like she was afraid she might come apart. Lila Mae, who'd come and waited outside the sheriff's office without being asked, didn't run to her, didn't hug her. She just moved close enough for June to feel she wasn't alone. June whispered, voice broken, "I said things. I said what he wanted." Lila Mae answered in that low, steady way that didn't waste comfort, but didn't waste truth either. "You said it because he squeezed you. That's not truth. That's survival." The state man heard it and wrote something down. To people from outside, a sentence like that isn't drama. It's a clue. Meanwhile, Evelyn Thibodeaux sat at home with curtains half drawn, receiving support visits. Church ladies came and went with cakes and soft words. Evelyn thanked them with the same measured smile. Dignity on the surface, calculation underneath. When the sheriff called to say the state was in town, Evelyn's smile didn't fall. It just got smaller. She cleared the room and sent for Eli. When he came in, she didn't ask. She stated, "You did this." Eli kept his face still. "I did what needed doing." Evelyn stepped closer, voice low, like she could still steer him with tone. "You're bringing shame into this house." Eli looked at her with an old kind of tired. Shame is using a girl as a punching bag to save a name. For one quick moment, Evelyn's eyes lost their polish. It was gone as fast as it came, but it was there. And in that moment, Eli saw her plainly. Not just a grieving wife, but a woman willing to crush whatever she had to in order to keep control. She drew a breath and put the mask back on. "You don't know what you're messing with, Eli." "I do," he said. "I'm messing with lies." That afternoon, the state asked in the way that isn't really asking, that certain people come in and speak. Dupree sat sweating through his shirt. Caleb spoke little but firm. Time, back door, hat low. Lila Mae told what she'd seen without decoration. When they asked if she had anything else, she said calmly, "I found the ring in the glass. I kept it because I knew if I handed it over here, it would turn into talk." The investigator wrote it down without judging her, because the center of judgment had moved. That's when the name Lamarck surfaced for real. A county worker, pressed by paper and outside presence, admitted he'd seen Lamarck near the bank on the day of the withdrawal. A store owner admitted he'd sold gas to the same car that parked in the shadows on the night Harold vanished. Little admissions, stacked together, became a map. That night, without drama, the state cars drove out toward the river roads, where water runs slow and mud keeps secrets. No photographers, no sirens. They went the way men go when they're fixing something that's been leaking for a long time. When they came back, they didn't come back empty-handed. They didn't have to tell every detail. In towns like that, details are rarely spoken aloud. It was enough to see the investigators' faces when they walked back into the sheriff's office and shut the door. It was enough to hear the sheriff later, his voice stripped of all desire to manage. "We've got evidence." The town understood without fully understanding, and what it really understood was this: the easy version was dead. The next morning, the newspaper ran a bigger headline. Still careful, still not screaming, but official. State investigation advances in Thibodeaux case. Obstruction and fraud under review. The word obstruction didn't print Evelyn's name. Not yet, but the town knew how to read between lines. When Evelyn stepped out to go to church, the women who'd been squeezing her hands turned their faces away. Not out of sudden morality, out of fear of being seen too close to a falling house. A town is loyal to whoever is standing. For the first time, Evelyn tasted the loneliness she'd spent years handing out to others. By the end of that day, A state man knocked at her door with papers in hand. Not handcuffs in public. Evelyn's kind rarely falls that way. But the beginning of the fall, formal notices, interviews, a tightening net around influence, the house she'd run became a house being watched. That evening, Eli found Lila Mae outside Dupre's with the sun low. He looked exhausted, but there was a new space in him, a little room to breathe. "June's free," he said. Lila Mae nodded like that was the only prayer she recognized. "And my mother," Eli added. "She can't hold this down." Lila Mae looked at him and answered without celebration. "Then we'll see who's who for real." Eli reached out and held her hand for a moment. Right there, no hiding it. It wasn't movie romance. It was a man choosing a side, and the town saw it. For once, the town had to swallow its judgment instead of feeding it to somebody else. The town didn't change its heart in a week. Small towns don't change like that. What they change fast is their subject. The same mouths that had shaped June into a culprit now shaped Evelyn into a certainty, like they'd always known. People who build pedestals build the steps of a fall with the same steady hands. Once the state's investigation had a grip, the sheriff went back to being the sheriff he'd always been, a man who preferred the noise kept low. Only now, low noise wasn't his choice. It was his survival. He knew if he'd kept pushing the easy story, he'd have gone down with it. Deputy Harlan Piter got smaller, not in his body. He still stood like he owned the street, but in his power. When men from outside start asking questions on paper, hallway bravery disappears. Harlan tried to keep his chest out. He tried to give loud orders at the feed store. He tried to be the same man. But the town, which loves strength, also loves distance from trouble, and trouble now smelled like official files. June was cleared in the only way that town knew how to clear someone, quietly, without admitting it had been wrong. A short line ran in the paper, tucked where nobody had to look too hard. At this time, no evidence connects the young employee June to the disappearance. There was no public apology, because apologies require a kind of honor that doesn't show up often when the mistake was convenient. But the rope around June's neck loosened, and sometimes that's all life offers, not to repair everything, but to prevent the worst part. June came to the club late one afternoon with a small bag in her hand. Her face still carried the scare, but her shoulders weren't folded the way they had been. She stood at the door like she needed permission to enter, even though she'd worked there. Lila Mae walked up to her. June didn't hug her. She just held out the bag. "I'm leaving," she said. Lila Mae looked inside and saw what was there. Plain things. A clean handkerchief, a bar of soap, a pair of new socks, the kind of purchases a woman makes when she's starting over without making a show. "Where you headed?" Lila Mae asked. "My cousin's outside Baton Rouge," June said. "She says she can get me work at a diner. Daytime." Lila Mae nodded. She didn't ask for more. Too many questions become promises, and promises weigh. June swallowed, gathered herself. "Thank you." Lila Mae didn't soften into pretty words. She gave June something steadier. "Just don't go back to places that use you," she said. June blinked hard, and this time the tears that came weren't fear. They were release. "And you?" June asked. "You staying?" Lila Mae held still a moment. "I'm going to do what I need to do." June understood. She left with that small bag and the road ahead, already more than the town had wanted to give her. Dupre watched June go, standing behind the bar without his usual half-smile. He wasn't a cruel man. He was a businessman, shaped by a world built on compromise. But that week, he'd seen what compromise costs. When Lila Mae passed him, he said low, "I should have stopped it." Lila Mae didn't answer with kindness for kindness's sake. She answered with truth. "You stopped what you could when you decided not to lie." Dupree swallowed hard. That was about as close to forgiveness as a man like that could expect. Caleb stayed a few more days. Then he left, too. Not because anybody ran him off, but because he chose to go before the place pulled him back into the old silence. One night he ran his hand along the bar top like he was saying goodbye to a body. Outside, he stood with a cigarette that barely lit. "You heading out?" Lila Mae asked. Caleb nodded. "Got a brother in Lake Charles. Lined up work at a shop. Loud work, but honest. Lila Mae understood. Caleb wasn't running. He was choosing a place where he wouldn't have to carry the same story in his chest every night. He looked at her with that quiet, steady face and said, "You did the right thing." Lila Mae didn't accept it like praise. She asked the question she'd earned the right to ask. "And what does that get you?" Caleb let smoke out slow. "Means you won't hate yourself when you're old." It was the kind of sentence a person keeps. As for Eli Thibodeaux, her fall didn't come with handcuffs in the street. A woman like her rarely falls in a way that looks like punishment. She falls the way an old house falls, one board at a time. First came the formal notices, then the word that the state was looking at obstruction, at pressure on witnesses, at money that didn't sit right. Then came the small social shifts, people too busy to stop by, invitations that didn't arrive, smiles that didn't return. Doors that once opened for her now stayed politely shut. She still went to church for a while. Not going would have been an admission, but now she sat there and felt what she'd never had to feel before. Other people's silence, not respect, distance. The same distance she'd spent years handing out to other women with her polite voice and her sharp eyes. Eli paid a price, too, exactly the way he knew he would. At the bank, nobody fired him right away. Firing him would have looked like the bank had something to hide, but the way people treated him changed. Less conversation, less trust, more watching. One afternoon, the manager called him in and spoke like a man delivering what the town expected. "You need to think about your future." Eli answered calmly, "I am. You're throwing away your name," the manager said, like a name was a paycheck. Eli looked him straight on and said something he wouldn't have said months earlier. "If my name's only good for lying, I don't want it." Word traveled the way it always does. In that town, a sentence can burn. That week, Eli resigned. Not because he was pushed out, because if he was going to start over, he wanted to do it with clean hands. When he told his mother, Evelyn didn't scream. She only looked at him like she was watching an investment turn into loss. "You'll regret this," she said. Eli answered in the same low voice he'd carried since the war. "I'd regret staying more." The last time Lila Mae saw Evelyn up close was late one afternoon when Evelyn walked out of the sheriff's office beside a lawyer. Evelyn crossed the club's lot like she was moving through a room full of eyes. She didn't look at Lila Mae, but Lila Mae saw the tightness in her neck, the way her fingers gripped her purse. There was no joy in watching it, only a quiet certainty. Sometimes the world collects what it's owed. The truth about Harold came out in enough pieces to end the twisting. The state confirmed he'd been drawn into a meeting, that money had been involved, that a middleman had been paid, and that what was left of him had been found off the river road, where mud keeps what men try to hide. The paper didn't print it in detail. Small towns don't like details that stain their own face. But it printed enough so nobody could call it running off or drinking too hard. The funeral was quiet. The town came out of obligation. Evelyn came out of image. Eli came out of truth. He stood near the casket without easy tears, the way a man stands when he's already cried, where nobody watched. After the burial, Eli went to Dupre's one last time, not to drink, not to be comforted, just to close a door before opening another. Lila Mae was wiping down tables, hands steady like they always were. She looked up and saw something different in him, not bright hope, but settled decision. "I'm leaving," Eli said. Lila Mae didn't ask why. She already knew. "Where?" she asked. "Near your cousin in Lafayette," Eli said. "I talked to him. He says there's work with a small outfit. Nothing big, but work." Lila Mae went quiet. Her heart wanted one thing. Her mind remembered another. A small town doesn't let a club girl leave without dragging a label behind her. "You want me to come?" she asked, steady. No drama. Eli nodded. "I do." It was the plainest thing he'd said to her since she'd met him. Lila Mae glanced around the room. The bar, the stage, the back door. That door had swallowed a man and spat out judgment. She'd made it through the week without breaking. "I won't be your problem," she said, setting her condition. Eli answered just as firm. "You're not my problem. You're my choice." That's where the romance landed, where grown romance has to land. On the ground, in a decision, not in pretty promises. The next week, Lila Mae left Dupre's place. No big goodbye, no party. She handed her apron to the cook, shook Dupre's hand without smiling, and left a small envelope of money for Caleb. Not charity, respect for a man who spoke when it was easier to stay quiet. She went to her parents' house with one simple suitcase and said, plain, "I'm going." Her mother stared a long moment, pride and fear sitting in the same face. Her father stayed quiet like he always had. Out there, families don't always bless what they can't protect. Her mother finally asked, "You going with a man with a name?" Lila Mae answered, steady, "I'm going with a man with a word." Her father spoke then, rare but solid, "Then go, and don't come back owing anybody." The morning Eli and Lila Mae drove out. The sun was already high, and the air already warm. They put their bags in the car and took the highway without looking back more than once. In the mirror, the town got small, quick, but the weight of it took longer to lift. Lila Mae faced forward and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Future. Eli drove with both hands steady on the wheel, his face calm, like he could finally breathe without his last name watching him. A man telling this story in a low voice would say not every happy ending comes with music and applause. Sometimes a happy ending is just this: two people leaving a story that meant to swallow them, and leaving alive. If someone asked what Lila Mae carried out of that town, he'd say she carried a ring that got back to its owner too late, but got back. She carried a young woman who wasn't crushed. She carried a truth that didn't stay buried. And for the first time in her life, she carried her own name without shame. Not because the town granted it, but because she decided she'd paid enough. Out on that hot Louisiana road, the world didn't turn fair overnight, but inside that car for a few miles, it got quiet in a different way. Not fear, peace.